Bob Marley took her off the scope during the Wailers' Manhattan gig. She went every night and stood backstage, recounts Morgan, still dumbstruck years later at the memory of Anna at a reggae concert, let alone making the scene with the legendary Marley, who had a reputation as a womanizer. Anna was riveted, and she'd go out every night after the concerts with the band to have dinner and go on the town. When she came back, we said, "Anna, you look exhausted." She had these purple circles under her eyes, and she says she didn't have an affair, but she had this revelation and felt she had a mystical experience. I said, "Well, how come I'm not being invited?" When Anna found something that good, she wanted to keep it to herself. I don't think anything moved her as much as Bob Marley. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise. We're going to keep going in Front Row. This is the biography of Anna Wintour by Jerry Oppenheimer. We saw each other earlier today when I dropped that episode this morning, so no long intro needed. We just talked. So let's just jump right back into the story. We are doing chapter 13 and 14 today. Chapter 13 is entitled Playing Hardball. Things were changing in the British fashion magazine world by the mid-70s. Top editors wanted fashion people who could actually write, not just pick clothes. In 1974, Willie Landels decided that Jennifer Hawking would have to be replaced with somebody who had genuine journalism experience, someone who could write and edit and express on paper her thoughts about fashion. It was a difficult decision for him to make because they were close friends. He'd known Hawking for ages, since she was a young model, and he wanted to be fair and square with her, so he decided to ease her out. Somehow word leaked. Magazines, especially fashion magazines, being gossipy, competitive, and bitchy places, that Hawking was going to be replaced, and that Landels had begun a search for a new fashion editor. That's when Anna, 24, with no proper university schooling, with no writing ability, and with only 4 years of experience under her Gucci belt, let it be known through the two most important men in her life, John Bradshaw and Charles Wintour, that she was the brightest, the most creative, the most ambitious fashion person on staff, and therefore deserved and should be handed on a Tiffany platter the most important fashion position on staff of one of the hippest established magazines in all of Great Britain. Landels wasn't shocked that Anna wanted the top job. He always knew how hungry she was for power, and was aware of her dream to become editor of Vogue. But he was surprised by how she went about it. She never discussed the job with him directly. Anna's campaign began in an elegant private club in Mayfair over a fine meal. She was determined to be made the fashion editor, so she and Bradshaw took me to lunch, a very fancy place, and he did all the talking. Landels recalls vividly. "Willie, Jennifer's leaving," Bradshaw said. "I think you should make Anna the fashion editor." I said, "Bradshaw, I don't tell you how to write, so don't tell me how to run my magazine." It was perfectly amiable, but I could see Anna wasn't happy. Anna just sat there behind her fringe, poker-faced. She had a way when she wasn't happy about something, to look rather sulky. Between you and me, that kind of manipulative behavior, like I'm going to sit here and pout because I don't like the things you're saying, would make me want to withhold it all the more from her. I might have a bit of a mean streak, but if somebody's trying to manipulate me, man, I will just go in the opposite direction. And I just think that Anna showing up with her boyfriend and the boyfriend's going to tell me how it's going to be. I would make sure she never had that job if she tried to play something like that on me. When the luncheon ploy failed, Anna brought out her other big gun, her famous and powerful father. It was either a letter or a telephone call or both from him, recalls Landels. Charles Wintour had made a case for his favorite daughter's promotion, but without success. Though Landels certainly had come to know over the past several years that Anna was clever and creative, he felt she was too young, too inexperienced, too lacking in writing skills, and too unpopular with other staffers because of her icy, unfriendly demeanor to be promoted to the magazine's top fashion job. Yeah, if he's letting somebody go because they can't write, it would be so wrong for him to then hire somebody like Anna. It would just be so evident that he was controlled by other powerful people if he were to ever make a decision like that. And it could be one thing if she was an excellent writer, but I don't see how he would ever have been able to stand on his own 2 feet in his own magazine office if he had hired somebody who didn't have writing skills, if the whole reason he's letting the other editor go is because she can't write. Instead, he hired Min Hogg, who for a time had worked for Queen and for the Sunday Times and had been a photographer's representative and was doing freelance writing. From the start, Anna resented Min Hogg with a passion. Not only was she seething that she didn't get the top job, she also felt Hogg didn't know fashion and wasn't cutting edge. Anna considered that Min wasn't a fashionista, says Landels. But Min was very intelligent and very articulate, and I was delighted to talk to a fashion editor who could actually speak and write. It didn't take long for Minhag to feel the resentment emanating from Anna. We didn't get on. She didn't approve of me getting the job. She wanted it herself and was absolutely furious when she didn't get it, says Minhag years later, not enjoying dredging up the bad memories of that time. She had a degree of ambition that must eat away at her heart all the time. Fashion was her absolute world, and she did know more about it than me, so she just didn't know how to deal with having someone like me over her. Fashion, that's all she thought about, and she didn't like anyone who didn't. In other words, me. She didn't respect me for my work as a fashion editor at all, and despised my professional standing. Anna's contempt for her new boss exploded openly in Paris at the winter collections shortly after Hogg's arrival at the magazine. Hoping to bond with her deputy, Hogg took Anna along, but quickly discovered she was trying to undermine her. From day one, Anna let her contempt be known. I got a seat on the front row, and she didn't, Hogg recalls. She loathed that. She didn't need to say anything. It was perfectly obvious. Anna's behavior became so intolerable that Hogg was forced to make an emergency phone call to Willie Landels, who was enjoying a vacation in Italy. She told him that Anna was essentially sabotaging the important assignment. If she can, says Hogg, recalling that time, she will ride over anyone. Says Landels, I was on holiday and I had to leave to go to Paris to sort things out. Min called and said, Anna's making things rather difficult for me. You'd better come to Paris. She's making trouble. She's telling people not to listen to me. Anna was absolutely trying to undermine Min. It was like two mad dogs. It was all a bit naughty of Anna. I had to stay there the whole week like a policeman. Someone explain to me why this girl hasn't been fired yet. How has she not been fired? She runs that poor other little assistant out on a rail. She is constantly criticizing, being ugly, creating bad relationships, not only at the office, but also with lesser design houses. Now she is undermining her new boss. Why is this ratty little girl still here? Now, granted, her connections, as we've said many times, were very helpful to the magazine, and she did know how to do her job. But she's not the only person in London who knows fashion. I mean, I just can't even imagine putting up with this little twit. During the shows in Paris, Hogg also saw the seductive side of Anna's persona. She puts on a sort of femininity, pushes her hair about a bit, and men do go for her on sight, Hogg observes. There was an American journalist at the collection who never stopped photographing Anna. Anna coming in, Anna sitting down, just nonstop. If she was there, he couldn't take his eyes off her, and she knew it. It was a complicit thing. The photographer who had shot literally hundreds of photos of Anna over the years was Bill Cunningham, who later shot brilliant street fashions for the New York Times. After Paris, the chill emanating from Anna toward Hogg was palpable throughout the office. Anna and I talked about it, recalls Vivian Lasky. There was a feeling at the magazine that Anna was sort of a ball-buster, and she definitely knew that. She was a ball-buster, and she felt that if she were a man, it would be admired. It wasn't the first time Anna felt her career had been derailed over the years by controlling people. Now, Anna's career, if it's being derailed, is by her clunky attitude. I mean, how can you go around just pushing people around, bitching, moaning, caustic, ugly, cruel, and then be like, I can't believe all these controlling people are trying to take my destiny away from me. Girl, you took your destiny away from yourself when you decided to act like this. Except, of course, in this world, it would seem that ratty behavior is always rewarded. But it does help when your father is some super powerful person who can continue to open doors for you. Let me just tell you this much right now. If Anna had not had all the connections that she did, they would have bounced her ass. It's all because she was bringing people in that they needed. And I don't know if she realized that or she thought that they were keeping her because of her brilliance. Not long after the Paris shows, Anna quit while Minhag stayed on until 1979. All Anna has ever said about her tenure at Harper's and Queen was that her rise by gradual degrees from fashion assistant to Minhag's number 2 was not meteoric, a tidbit of irony she gloatingly tossed to a journalist when she was appointed editor-in-chief of British Vogue in the mid-'80s. During that time, my father would pick me up for lunch, and we would each talk about our problems, and I guess I got a feeling of what it was like to be an editor, she observed. Then they fired the fashion editor and appointed another one over my head. No mention of what happened in Paris, ever. I got straight on a plane for New York. At the time, it seemed the place with the most pull, partly because I had a boyfriend there, partly because I love American society. You're not placed by your surname and accent as you are in London. Anna left the magazine in March 1975, though her name last appeared on the masthead in the May issue. Why would she gripe and moan about, being placed in London by your accent and surname when that has only ever benefited her? Why is she acting like, I wanted to go to a place where everything was just a little bit more equal? No, you don't. You've always benefited from the inequality of the city you grew up in. I mean, what even is that statement? Who is this person who takes no responsibility for themselves? Who is just a little brat stealing up and acting as though she's really been injured? Somebody's really done her a grave injustice by not giving her a job she wasn't qualified for. How could you ever show up and just undermine people like this and think it wasn't going to burn you later? I don't know, because it didn't. Y'all, I don't understand what is happening with this person. I don't understand why so many men can't pull their eyes off of her. I don't understand how she is not fired for her bad attitude. I do not understand how she continues to manage to stay on and how she continues to manage to climb through the ranks. Is everybody stupid? I mean, if she went through the world thinking she was superior, I almost can understand why she thinks that, because all of her actions have no regular person consequences. She's not attractive, but everyone thinks she's beautiful. She's mean as a snake, but that doesn't seem to ever have any consequences with what job she can have and who she can work for. She has no writing skills, but she becomes an editor. I mean, talk about living in some kind of other dimension of reality. For the rest of us, we have to mind our P's and Q's that we might have friends. For the rest of us, we actually have to work at things if we ever want to have a job that uses those skills and talents that we previously did not possess. For the rest of us, we have to work at being beautiful. We can't just walk out like a homely librarian and be called beautiful. I mean, I'm struggling to understand what world she lives in. All right, anyway. As Anna was abandoning London to begin a new life in New York, and with her relationship with Bradshaw on rocky ground, her parents' marriage of more than 3 decades was on its last legs. Friends of the Wintours, like Drusilla Bayfish-Shulman, think the reason for the breakup was obvious. For years, Charles was hardly ever at home. He had an intense family relationship that was entirely the responsibility of Noni. She didn't sympathize with what he was doing on the paper and despised Beaverbrook. He was flirtatious with other women, and of course their adored son had died. She'd have had to have been a saint. There had been several attempts to salvage the marriage, one of which was a vacation, because both enjoyed traveling. They took a trip by automobile through Afghanistan, and I always interpreted that in view of what happened later as an attempt to save the marriage, says Arthur Schlesinger. I doubt, though, whether either of them said to me it was a last-ditch effort, and that's a fair appraisal. Charles Wintour had all but left his wife for the talented women's magazine editor, Audrey Slaughter, otherwise known as the flame-haired temptress, who was about a decade his junior. Their affair became public thanks to Private Eye, which published the juicy details through the mid to late 70s. I wasn't even very red-haired, Slaughter protested feebly years later, and I always wanted to be dark and mysterious. Well, protested feebly is a great way to describe that comment on the story. Why would you even make that statement? You were just thrown all over the pages of Private Eye as, being the homewrecker, and you're like, my hair wasn't even red. Okay, girl. Whatever you need to say. Wintour had been introduced to Slaughter at a dinner party by her friend Shirley Conran, a journalist, one-time wife of the designer Terence Conran, and later author of a string of bestsellers. Unlike some of Wintour's other female companions, Slaughter was not glamorous, and didn't have anything like Noni's Boston society background or Ivy League education, but Slaughter captivated Anna's father. Audrey's a very brilliant editor, very finger on the pulse, an energetic businesswoman, always launching new magazines, and that's what attracted Charles, says Valerie Grove, who had known Slaughter since the late 60s. They had something in common which he didn't have anymore with Noni. Audrey was a great contrast to Noni, much warmer, amusing, self-deprecating, clearly happy to be on Charles' arm. Charles was captivated by her. Charles missed the sort of adoration that Audrey brought, notes Drusilla Bayfish-Shulman. She worshipped Charles, and he could do no wrong. She didn't have any of the kind of intellectual judgments about him that Noni had. She just really adored him. With their marriage in tatters, the Wintours had sold off their wonderful house in Fillmore Gardens, where Anna had spent her swinging 60s teenage years, and moved into what Grove describes as a ghastly, soulless apartment on Southampton Row, steps from a subway station and a blue-collar tourist hotel. Attempts at putting on a good front for friends were disastrous, such as the time Wintour tossed a Sunday brunch at the new apartment, inviting some of his favorite Evening Standard staffers. Noni had taken to her bed, claiming she was sick, and everyone brought flowers to try to cheer her up after being warned by Charles. I think actually, she'd said, "Oh, to hell with your staff. I'm going to bed. I'm not feeling well." And she was ill, recalls Grove, one of the guests. "We went into the bedroom where she was sitting up in bed, feeling just grumpy, gave her flowers, and then went on with our lunch." Grove felt the Wintour apartment had the aura of a marriage falling apart. Why would you sell your huge house to go move into a clunky apartment if you're still, together? I mean, it'd be one thing if you, had to sell off your assets and divide what you had, but they're both living in this clunky apartment? I don't understand what's going on. A string of sometimes hilarious gossip items about the Wintour's marital travails and his affair with Slaughter appeared in the grovel column of Private Eye. The source of most, if not all, of it was mostly likely Nigel Dempster, who some believe was still angry that Wintour thought he wasn't good enough for his daughter or for his newspaper. In a profile of Dempster that was published in Harper's and Queen in 1974 under the headline, "The Scum Also Rises," John Bradshaw wrote that Dempster had made a deal in 1973 with his employer, the Daily Mail, to secretly write the grovel column as long as he didn't include any Daily Mail dirty laundry. According to Bradshaw, this allowed Dempster to attack his targets with greater impunity. As a result of his rude assaults, Dempster has been banned from various London clubs. He's made powerful enemies within his own profession, and more than a few of his victims have seriously considered sending heavies round. Meanwhile, Anna would hold Audrey Slaughter in utter contempt for years, blaming her for destroying her parents' marriage, her animosity intensifying after her father married Slaughter. It would take almost 2 decades until her father's death for Anna to have a semblance of rapprochement with Slaughter. What an unfortunate last name, Slaughter. And you just killed some guy's marriage. Although that guy was killing his own marriage. And Noni didn't seem like she was trying whatsoever to be a sort of wife that wanted to be in the marriage. You can't undermine a man all the time and disrespect what he does and think he's going to come around and just love to be with you. You never want to show up with him. You never want to go anywhere with him. And you're constantly criticizing what he does because it doesn't politically align with what you think. Well, shouldn't you have sorted that out before you married him? If this is a person who holds his political beliefs pretty loosely, and will say whatever he needs to say to stay employed, and you don't like that kind of behavior, then you really shouldn't marry that person. It's not his fault that's the way he goes through life. That's your fault for marrying somebody who didn't share your values. That's kind of something you have to sort out. What I also find it rather disagreeable for somebody to just kind of say what their boss wanted them to say, even if it didn't align with what they thought. Yeah, I would find that contemptible, but I also wouldn't marry somebody like that. And so to punish somebody your whole married life because they turned out to be somebody that you don't like, but you probably could have figured that out beforehand, that's on you, Noni. Now, I am not advocating for this kind of affair lifestyle. I think he was a snake. I think he should have dealt with Noni the way, I think he should have, instead of just sort of going off and doing his own thing and living his own life. Seems to me like he could have sat her down and said, "If we're going to stay together, I need you to respect me. This is how I feel. This is how what you're doing makes me feel." Instead of just kind of setting up a house. And then, for a long time, he lived elsewhere. They lived in London and he lived elsewhere. And it would have made all this cheating a lot easier to do. I don't know. I just think there's 2 sides to every story. And I think that, of course, it's disingenuous for Anna to act like, oh, it's my dad's mistress that broke up the marriage. No, their marriage was already having problems. That's why he had a mistress. But I think the dad was a snake. I think the mom was selfish. And I don't even see how they could have ever come back from the death of their son. Not with that kind of behavior. I think overcoming the death of a child would be excruciating. And I think it would be hard on any marriage. But I think if you're already so polar opposite in so many ways, trying to figure out a way that you can both navigate and function and figure out how to move through this grieving process together. I don't even know how you do that because I don't see how these two are moving through just regular life together. But then trying to move through grief together, how? How is this going to work out? How is this relationship ever going to see the light of day? But it is weird because they really loved each other at the beginning. So much that she abandoned her child in Boston with her parents so she could go hang out in London to be near where her husband was. So at one point they really did care about each other and put each other first, above all things. And the death of their child does seem to be really terrible, but I think it was her contempt and disdain for what he did for work. I think that is really what turned him off to her. I don't know how you stay married to somebody who you find contemptible, who you disrespect. How can you have a marriage if you don't respect the partner? I don't think that's going to work. So super problematic relationship, but also seemingly problematic in so many fixable ways. All right. The next chapter is entitled Axed American Style. What might that be about? 25-year-old Anna landed in New York City in the long, hot summer of 1975, just in time for the Big Apple's era of decadence. Anna's world was Manhattan's high life and nightlife, the trendy Upper East Side, where she again established a shaky live-in relationship with Bradshaw, whom she'd followed to New York. The chic Saturday Night Fever scene at Studio 54, with its Andy Warhol Beautiful People set. The downtown scene, where other recent British expatriates, journalists, and fashion people lived in funky artist lofts and ran trendy new boutiques. Though the city was almost bankrupt, there was nowhere in the world more hip and open than New York in the mid to late 70s. It was a freewheeling era of artistic creativity. Anna's arrival in the far-out 70s, however, was greeted by a fashion scene that wasn't very far out, and fashion magazines of the day had little of her kind of pizzazz, which may have been part of her master plan for coming to America, even though she denied having one, or merely a stroke of good luck. Women's wear was nowhere, with more focus on the personality of who was wearing the clothes than the clothes themselves. Men wore polyester leisure suits and loud shirts with big collars and gold chains around their necks, a la Tony Manero. Women's fashion was very laid back, relaxed, and chic because of its simplicity, spurred by designs from Calvin Klein, Bill Blass, Diane von Furstenberg, and Ralph Lauren. Sparked by the feminist movement and sexual freedom, women were declaring their individuality. The miniskirt and bell-bottoms from the 60s remained in vogue, but 70s skirts were in two other lengths, midi and maxi. Jeans paired with tight white t-shirts, which became a favorite of Anna's, who also wore hot pants, were a chic and popular look. On the high end of the fashion food chain were designs by Givenchy, Norel, and Oscar de la Renta. And then came Woody Allen's Annie Hall, Diane Keaton's La-Di-Da look, a tie, a waistcoat, a man's shirt, 30s-style wide pants, designed and styled by Ralph Lauren, became the thing overnight. Anna felt that fashion, and especially fashion magazines, in mid-70s America needed a major fix of direction and focus and a creative eye, something she was confident she had plenty of, so she began job hunting. As she once stated, "It wasn't until I came to the United States that I became more disciplined and more focused." By late 1975, she'd caught the eye of Carrie Donovan, the flamboyant and eccentric fashion editor at Harper's Bazaar, which was going through some rough times under editor-in-chief Tony Mazzala. Creative and managerial turmoil had become a way of life at the magazine. Donovan, a good 2 decades older than Anna, had come to Bazaar from Vogue, where her mentor, Diana Vreeland, once told her that in fashion she had the common touch, which was a compliment. Donovan and Anna had much in common. Both had bobs, and both had become fashionistas at a young age. When Donovan was 10, she sent Jane Wyman sketches for a wardrobe and received a treasured thank-you note. And like Anna, Donovan had her first taste of fashion in a low-level spot in a department store. Anna at Harrods, Donovan in the hat department at Saks Fifth Avenue, under the wife of Vogue's Alexander Lieberman. Donovan, though, had a formal education, having graduated from the Parsons School of Design. With a reputation for discovering and nurturing new talent, Donovan liked what she saw in Anna and hired her as a junior editor. The fact that Anna had worked for Harper's and Queen also helped. The two magazines had Hearst corporate ties. Mazzala in New York was on the masthead of Harper's and Queen as an editorial director, a position having to do with Bazaar's editions in countries around the world. Anna started on the bottom rung again as a $12,000 a year junior fashion editor. She appeared for the first time on the masthead in January 1976. She didn't have an easy go. Her British frost and in-your-face ambition turned off her American colleagues and bosses, and her edgy concepts didn't go over in what then was a conservative and tumultuous environment. But Anna had become part of Bazaar's grand tradition, America's first fashion magazine, a graphics leader that debuted in 1867 and over the decades had the world's most famous fashion editors at the top, Vreeland, Carmel Snow, and brilliant photographers like Avedon and Man Ray. But when Anna was hired, the magazine was having severe problems because management wanted to keep the outdated look. As a result, advertisers and subscribers were abandoning the old girl in droves. One of the reasons Donovan hired Anna was that Bazaar needed an infusion of new blood, a younger approach, something kicky and contemporary that would appeal to advertisers and readers. Anna, one of 4 young fashion editors under Donovan, was assigned to a tiny office that she shared with another chic and engaging editor, Alida Morgan, who had previously worked under Vreeland and had been at Bazaar for little more than a year. Morgan, a society girl, was immediately impressed with the new hire's demeanor. very dry, kind of deadpan, and her style. Unlike the other girls who came to work looking like slobs, surprising at a fashion magazine, Anna was usually wrapped in designer clothes and wore very little makeup, and every hair was perfectly in place, though she changed the length and direction of the fringe slightly from time to time. Marilyn Kirshner, another glamorous and with-it fashion editor who had been at the magazine for 5 years and whose name was above Anna's on the masthead, believes the only thing that stood out about Anna was the Missoni and Kenzo that she wore and her upper-class British accent. Otherwise, she was very aloof. Morgan was of interest to Anna. Besides being striking, she had a blue ribbon pedigree. She was a granddaughter of Averell Harriman, a presidential advisor and multimillionaire, which appealed to Anna's elitist side. Morgan perceived Anna as risque and mischievous. One night, she recalls, I was having dinner with my dad, and Anna was in the same restaurant, and she sent over a bottle of expensive champagne, and my father said, "Uh-oh, she's trouble, schoolgirl trouble." And I said, yeah, she is. It wasn't long, though, before Morgan and others in the office saw through Anna's schoolgirl guise, always a great come-on to men, and became aware of her enormous ambition and incredible discipline, her marvelous visual sense, and her intense interest in everything to do with fashion and style. And Morgan suddenly realized that Harper's Bazaar was just a way station. Anna always wanted Vogue, she states. I knew that from the jump. Everybody knew it. She wanted to run Vogue, and the Vogue to run is American Vogue. That was the plan. She absolutely knew from the jump that that's what she wanted, and that's why she came to America. Her plan was to come here, get a better job, and start moving up. To prove it, staffers remember Anna's unconscious doodling on Bazaar scratch pads. The word she kept writing over and over was Vogue. Not long after Anna got down to business, the magazine promoted some of its chic and glamorous staff in a 2-page spread in the March 1976 issue headlined Bazaar's Single Women, with the caption, "The New Young Spirit of Harper's Bazaar. Here are some of Bazaar's single women who help keep that spirit going in every issue." The layout was part of a special issue devoted to America's bachelorettes. Photographed by Bill King, the double truck showed 11 coiffed and gorgeous staffers. Bill was making us all jump up and down to get into the spirit, recalls Kirshner. He wanted us to look very happy. In King's shot, Anna is where she would always be in the fashion magazine world, front row center. She's wearing a modified bob, her fringe boyishly brushed to one side. The other staffers appear officious and career-girlish, smiling broadly, sporting long-sleeved black T-shirts emblazoned with the word Bazaar in white. Except that is for Anna. While the others have their hands planted on their hips or behind their backs, Anna's are crossed, blocking the words Bazaar, and she's the only one wearing something over the company T-shirt, a chic Kenzo vest. Looking back years later and knowing the heights to which Anna subsequently rose, Kirshner believes the photograph is telling. Completely covering the Bazaar T-shirt with a Kenzo vest is so symbolic, she observes, armchair analyst-like. It was Anna clearly asserting herself. As another member of the fashion team, Zazzle Loven, notes, Anna was a little bit disdainful of the lack of sophistication in the American fashion magazine scene, and she didn't fit in with Hearst Corporate. That was her attitude. She certainly wasn't staring down her nose at everyone. She was one of the players, but she just had a stronger vision, a stronger personality. She was very independent and had her own sense of taste, had her own way of doing things, and that didn't jibe with Tony Mazzola's way. Anna quickly butted heads with Mazzola, whose colleagues assert had major problems with Anna's independence, ego, ambition, and edgy fashion point of view. At the same time, Anna felt that he didn't understand her creativity, particularly the very stylized photographs that were coming back from the shoots she was assigned. She was ordered by Mazzola, on a number of occasions, to go back to reshoot. At a certain point, Anna adamantly refused to turn in all the film as required, editing it with the photographers and turning in only the shots she thought should be used. Mazzola had never encountered such a stubborn and independent neophyte editor, so Anna quickly rose to the top of his shit list. Years later, as head of Vogue, Anna would do a 180 and make life a living hell for staffers and photographers who didn't turn in every single frame of a shoot. At the same time, Anna was hiring photographers like James Moore, who was considered more experimental, which also infuriated Mazzola. In fact, Moore's highly sexual and erotic work was inspired by Bazaar's legendary art director, Alexei Brodovich, who ran the magazine at its creative height from the 30s to the end of the 50s with fashion editor Carmel Snow. Moore began shooting for Bazaar in the early 60s under Marvin Israel, Brodovich's remarkable successor. But after Mazzola came on board, Moore was being used less, until Anna, who loved his work and working with him, began giving him assignments. Mazzola made Anna reshoot with Jimmy 4 times on a couple of assignments, recalls Morgan. Anna would pick 5 shots and say, "This is it." She picked 3 and gave him 2 backups. Anna had begun handling beauty stories along with fashion, with Moore. They worked so closely and spent so much time together the rumors began to fly at the magazine. Anna was a little naughty with the men, observes Morgan. She had a flirty quality about her. Bradshaw was the love of her life, but she was tempted by a lot of other things, and she was saying he was getting too possessive and too demanding. His life took him away a great deal, and her life was taking her away a great deal on shooting trips, and that's difficult. It was a tempting world out there, and Anna's a very physical and passionate woman. Anna began asking girls in the office to cover for her. She was always hysterical about that, says Morgan. She'd call up from wherever and say, "God, if Bradshaw calls, you've got to say." She had that bad girl component. Years later, nervously laughing when asked about the gossip, Moore says, "I'm taking the 5th, refusing to confirm or deny an intimate relationship with Anna. "We had a working relationship and we had a friendship," he concedes. "It wasn't love. We weren't living with each other. Anna and I worked well together. When people have romances, after the romance, they're out of each other's life, but Anna and I worked together for a long while." But Morgan, Anna's closest acquaintance at Bazaar, says if she had a flirtation, it was usually because of something like that extraordinary thing of being stuck with Jimmy Moore in the studio for months. That was whom we lied to Bradshaw about. When she picked someone, it would be on the side, very discreet, and it was passion. And it was usually a photographer in those days. Like with Jimmy, they spent so much time together in the studio. He's very bright, and their sensibilities locked so well. We covered for her like mad. We lied through our teeth to Bradshaw. Bradshaw, who was very macho and very jealous, was wildly suspicious. He was very obsessive, and he used to call all the time, which is why we all had to invent cover stories for her. But Anna invented them for us, too. "She's working late at the studio. They're on location, they can't be reached. We're all going out to dinner." It would have been hard to explain to Bradshaw what happened when you're in the creative setting. So intense, minds merging, senses merging. If you find each other at all attractive, it's pretty difficult not to, at some point, let it happen. It's almost a step in the creative process. They were so tightly put together, exposed together, because there's a lot of trust in a photo shoot. The magazine kept Anna working with Jimmy, and then they got pissed off when the pictures started looking a little more erotic. Well, what did they expect? While Anna was seemingly playing the field, she and Bradshaw were living together in a small, lovely apartment in a brownstone on the Upper East Side in the 70s, according to Vivian Lasky, who was working on another graduate degree, this time at Columbia University, and living in Upper Manhattan with the man who would become her husband. During this period, Anna and Lasky had pleasant lunches and shopping. During one of those excursions, as they breezed through Henry Bendel, Anna made a prediction about the future of the American woman that she firmly believed would materialize. She felt that the new woman was going to be so career-oriented and busy that this leisurely shopping we were doing would become a thing of the past. Anna truly believed that these new career women like herself, would have personal shoppers working for them. Anna occasionally visited Lasky's apartment for dinner, but always without Bradshaw, which Vivian thought odd. Lasky also visited Anna in Bradshaw's flat, and what stood out most to her was their bedroom. It was monastic, white and spare, she says. Lasky perceived that their relationship was on increasingly unsteady ground. They stayed together amicably long after things were over, she says. Anna should have moved out when she knew it was over, but she was comfortable. They stayed on decent terms, but they'd grown apart. There was a real difference from how they were in London, and even how they were when they first came to New York. But it went on and on and on. They were going in different directions. I could see it. I did see it. And she admitted to me that they were growing apart. It didn't make her feel good. It was a loss. But Anna was always philosophical and never whined. Besides her friendship with Moore, Anna had fallen for someone more unlikely. A dreadlocked, ganja-smoking black Rastafarian, albeit a famous one. The first third world superstar. As it turned out, it was Bradshaw who helped Anna turn on. One of his close friends, a member of his Rat Pack, was a creative record producer and multi-billionaire businessman Chris Blackwell, founder of Island Records, who brought reggae into the mainstream in the mid-70s with one of his major discoveries, Bob Marley and the Wailers. During Anna's tenure at Bazaar, the Wailers had a big concert in New York, and through Blackwell, Bradshaw had arranged for a backstage pass for Anna at the Beacon Theater. She virtually disappeared for a week. As Elida Morgan succinctly put it, Anna met God. Bob Marley took her off the scope during the Wailers' Manhattan gig. She went every night and stood backstage, recounts Morgan, still dumbstruck years later at the memory of Anna at a reggae concert, let alone making the scene with the legendary Marley, who had a reputation as a womanizer. Anna was riveted, and she'd go out every night after the concerts with the band to have dinner and go on the town. When she came back, we said, "Anna, you look exhausted." She had these purple circles under her eyes, and she says she didn't have an affair, but she had this revelation and felt she had a mystical experience. I said, "Well, how come I'm not being invited?" But when Anna found something that good, she wanted to keep it to herself. I don't think anything moved her as much as Bob Marley. Anna's hard playing, along with trying to stay on top of her game, and a difficult work situation required enormous physical and emotional stamina. To handle this anxiety-filled load, she had a daily regimen that included the same high-protein lunch of scrambled eggs and bacon, or eggs and sheared chicken livers. At the Tatty Women's Exchange, where, with Morgan, she'd invent cover stories for Bradshaw and complain about Tony Mazzola. Anna also took an hour a day for an expensive and tough physical training workout at Lot Burke's. Just as Philip Kingsley was Anna's hair guru, Burke became her body's Svengali. Burke was a ballet dancer, a free spirit who had escaped Hitler's Germany, and had become one of London's swinging 60s icons who practically terrorized his clients into shape. As corpulent Miss Middle America worked out Dancing to the Oldies with perky Richard Simmons on VHS at home, stick-thin Anna, obsessed with keeping her trim body looking like a lean, mean, and sculpted fighting machine, did her exercises to pop music at Burke's chic brownstone studio in Manhattan. The routines of the Lot Burke method had been given bizarre and sexually explicit names: effing a bidet, the prostitute, the peeing dog, the love-making position, and the French lavatory. Therefore, men were never permitted into her studio. At Bazaar, Jimmy Moore viewed Anna as a phenomenal young editor who supported his work and didn't try to control his ideas or creativity. She was gifted, he declares. She was growing, she was ambitious, not just to get ahead, but to do good work. She was one of the best editors I ever worked with. Anna had style, intelligence, and was a take-charge person. I could never see her as an assistant to anyone. Like others, Moore felt that Mazzola, a short-sighted and conservative corporate mentality, was a hindrance to Anna's creativity. Tony, he says, had his own ideas. As Morgan points out, we didn't get any support from the ruling brass, so it was very difficult, and it was a cheap place that cut corners in every direction. The art department was impossible, putting type right over a model's face. All of this incensed Anna. Even more maddening to her was the model situation. Mazzola, according to staffers, had a list of half a dozen or so approved CoverGirl types that Anna and the other fashion editors were supposed to use. "It was Cheryl Tiggs, Cheryl Tiggs, Cheryl Tiggs," recalls Morgan. "We used to get letters asking, 'Who's in love with Cheryl Tiggs there?' When Anna tried to use new girls, Mazzola balked. Not to be denied, Anna and others convinced Donovan, who supported change, to bring on a models editor responsible for recruiting new faces. Hired was Morgan's close friend, Wendy Goodman, sister of Tone Goodman, who later became a top lieutenant of Anna's at Vogue, her fashion director. "We had to fight every step of the way," says Morgan, and the fights Anna had were real knockdown drag-out. Elsa Clench, the fashion doyenne, was then a senior editor at Bazaar. She perceived Anna as very conscientious. She had to learn her way around the city, learn her way around manufacturers, but she was so methodical and tried very hard to please. But Tony was a very difficult man, who ran a tight ship and was a control freak, who really didn't want anybody's ideas. So it was impossible for someone like Anna to succeed there. He was so insane about cutting costs that he used to sit in his office and go through all the messenger slips and then send memos saying, "Why was this sent?" And Anna had her own vision of where she wanted to go. A perfectionist, Anna made it clear that she thought of Mazzola as the Hearst button man, who watched every nickel. When Morgan asked for a small raise, Mazzola told her to get married and ask your family, and was opposed to doing anything innovative. Thus, Anna's end came quickly. She's maintained over the years that she was fired because the powers that be didn't think she had a grasp of the U.S. fashion market. "They fired me after a year and a half for being too European. I was screamed at all the time," she told the London Guardian years later when she took over British Vogue. "They didn't feel I understood the American woman. Maybe they had a point." Actually, Anna had shaded the truth a bit about the time spent in the magazine. The fact is that she was axed after about 9 months, not 18, or even a year, as she states in some interviews. She last appeared on Bazaar's masthead in September 1976, and no one who worked closely with her recalls her being screamed at. The fights were a two-way street. The real reason Anna was given her walking papers was a dispute with Mazzola over a series of very moody Jimmy Moore black and white photographs taken of a sultry model during a lingerie shoot. Tony thought the photos were too sexual, says Morgan. They had this huge fight about it, with Anna intensely defending her work on the shoot, and he fired her. We all knew what was going on, and we were really upset and angry. Anna was very upset, but she came to our office and said, "It's okay, I'll be fine." And she was. Anna's coming to Bazaar was a non-event, recalls Marilyn Kirshner, and her leaving was a non-event. It was less than a year, just a drop in the bucket. When one reads her profiles, Anna kind of slides over it. She certainly didn't leave her mark on the magazine, and I don't think she was really allowed to or given a chance to develop. After the firing, Zazel Lovin came to the conclusion that Anna might have appeared upset, but really didn't care. She's always had a strong sense of self and felt that getting fired was their problem, not hers, that she'd just take her vision elsewhere and refine it. Years later, Mazzola denies firing Anna and claims it was Carrie Donovan who wielded the axe. He asserts that he ran a creative fashion magazine. Carrie, who was the huge star who came from Vogue, was the one who constructed the department and was responsible for who came in and who left, he says. Carrie Donovan decided she wanted to make a change, and that's what she did. It was her right to say, "I think we need to make a change. People can think what they like, but I didn't fire Anna Wintour." I remember once sitting with Anna. I happened to be in Paris for the collections, and she was the editor in charge. Anna was very professional. And I remember she did a great job with those pages. We published everything she worked on. If anything, I tried to encourage the editors to do unusual, interesting things. Anna also remembered that shoot in Paris. It was for the couture, she said, and the editor-in-chief had a breakdown because I had used models with dreadlocks. You know, it just wasn't a blonde American look. I feel like we have all kinds of lies going on here. That's the end of our reading for the day. I feel like that guy, Tony Mazzola, is not telling us the truth. Not because I believe Anna, but because everybody else said he was a terror to work with. So, like, everyone's wrong except for you? Everyone said you were a penny pincher who wouldn't let new ideas except for you? I mean, what are you talking about? Nobody wants to be remembered as the guy who was holding up the future editor of Vogue in her creative vision. So I feel like he is definitely recreating history. But then Anna is an unreliable source too. She's a liar. How many times have we read in this book so far that she says one thing during interviews that she's had since becoming the editor of Vogue, but then we go on to talk about the reality of the situation? I mean, she just makes up stuff all the time. I don't like her secretiveness. I don't know where it came from. Last episode, we discussed where it could potentially have come from, but we don't have any solid evidence for why she's such a secretive and sort of deceitful person. But she is exceedingly deceitful. And I just wonder why. Why is she deceitful? Because it would seem that she has no need to be. She is all along working and doing the job. She's not skimming along, living off of the generosity of others like her boyfriend Bradshaw, who says he's a writer but spends most of his time eating other people's food, using other people's servants, and sleeping with other people's girlfriends. I am confused as to why she feels such a need to hold everything so close. Like, why is she so closed off? Where did this come from? Her parents were icy and strange, so was that just the culture at home? But how do we know? She didn't spend any time with them. She lived down in the basement in her own apartment. Who raised this girl? Where did she get these ideas? I don't know. I mean, like I said in the last episode, here we are. Now we're 14 chapters in. I still don't understand what makes this person tick. Will we ever understand? Maybe by the end of the book we'll know. All right. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me twice today. And I will see you guys again tomorrow. Bye.